Good morning, Woodland. Welcome back to our summer series where we're talking about calling, that each one of us is called by God. Now, I don't know about you, but all my life I've kind of wanted some kind of Damascus Road experience. And my calling has come in different ways. And I think that's exactly the way that calling comes. It comes in different ways for different people. A couple of years ago, I started writing a little play about two brilliant minds, Abraham Heschel and Reinhold Niebuhr. They became friends when they lived in New York City. One taught at the Jewish seminary, one taught at Union Seminary. And then they started walking together and they talked together. And we don't have any kind of record of what they talked about. But I wrote a little play about that. And this morning, I'd like to just give a brief snippet of this because I think it talks to our sense of calling. Heschel says, I believe it to be true that one can have personal encounters with the Almighty. Turning to Niebuhr, have you ever felt that you had a personal encounter with God? Niebuhr said, I've always wanted one. I mean, I've been drawn to the stories of Moses meeting God in a burning bush, Elijah being quiet enough to hear God's still small voice, and for my own tradition, Paul encountering Jesus on the Damascus Road. But that just hasn't happened to me, not in some kind of personal, audible, or visible sense. Heschel says, well, have you ever considered that there may be other ways that God speaks to us, Riney? One of the things I've discovered about this and have discovered about you is that you have a Germanic trait of maintaining a certain emotional space in your relationships. And please don't hear that as a criticism, just an observation. Niebuhr says, I don't disagree with that. Growing up, my family was reluctant to show emotion. We were averse to showing displays of feeling. And the truth is, we weren't all that expressive in private either. We didn't hug each other or verbalize our feelings. Our affection for one another was more cerebral than anything else. Heschel said, that's exactly my point. Could God not be speaking to you through your own nature, nudging you to examine your ways and your ideas and your relationships in a more, should I say, objective way? For instance, in an anthropomorphic sense, I think God is not only multilingual, but multi-emotional. God may not ask you to dance as he might do with me, but he might very well inspire you to contemplate on certain matters. I believe that is how God speaks to physicists, mathematicians, and then turning to Niebuhr, winking at him, even ethics professors. This morning, we're talking about calling once again. And we have two guests that are just unbelievable ministers. Each one is a gifted minister in her or his own right. And they ministered to all of us, especially to Lisa and me, in such meaningful ways. Nilda, Conrad, I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. I want for folks to know a little bit more about you. So tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about your history, how you met, and a little bit about your family backgrounds.
Hi, Mike. As you know, we were both born in Cuba. And I truly believe that we would have never met had we stayed in Cuba. We lived on different sides of the island. Our families were in different circles. We would have never met. Then in 1962, Conrad's family came to the States. He was 7. And in 1969, my family came to the States when I was 12. I am the oldest of 4 siblings. I grew up in a very fundamentalist Southern Baptist family. My grandfather was a pastor of our church for 35 years. Really? Now, I was very close to my grandfather. He invested a lot of time in me. I was the first grandchild to be born. And he really spent time with me and instilled in me a desire to serve God. The problem was that in that religious setting, I was very limited in how I could express that service to God. As a woman, the only thing I could aspire to be was either a missionary or be married to a pastor. And I gave my life to Christ at the age of 9. And since that time, I started praying that God would either make me a missionary or have me marry a pastor. And I prayed that for the longest time without telling anyone. Then when our families came to the States, my family settled in the same town where Conrad's family had settled, and we joined again another very fundamentalist Southern Baptist Spanish-speaking church, where at the age of 14, I met 16-year-old Conrad.
Well, my family life growing up in Cuba was, and here in the States, I came when I was, like Nilda said, when I was 7, was very different. I did not come from a religious family at all. I think growing up, the last time that my family attended church was when I was baptized as an infant, and they never attended again. So we were Catholic, but only by name. However, for whatever reason, I always felt a closeness to God in the church, and I loved going to mass. And even as a boy, back then it was safe for children to walk in the streets, in the city streets of northern New Jersey, and St. Joseph's Catholic Church was 5 blocks away from me, from our house, and I used to walk every Sunday to mass. And at that time in the 60s, the folk mass was just starting to take off, and I used to love to attend folk mass. My priest at St. Joseph's was Father Reinbold, and since my family never took me back to church after baptism to do my first communion, he prepared me for my first communion and did my first communion in private, because I was much older than the other children. And I did my first communion with him, and I prepared for confirmation, and I was confirmed at 12. And for the longest time, all I wanted to be in my life was a priest. I loved the church. I loved God. And I admired Father Reinbold and my other priest. And all I wanted to be was a priest. And of course, at that age, I could not articulate it as a call of God in me. But of course, looking back, I see that God was really calling me right from a very tender age. However, this church that Nilda said that her family attended was right around the corner in my city block. And they had this Baptist church, Hispanic Baptist church, and they had a very big Royal Ambassador program and a very big sports program, especially in the summer, basically to keep the inner city kids active. And I participated in Royal Ambassadors because I wanted to play sports. They had a requirement that you had to attend their worship service at least once a month. And I did. And I was scared to go. And I sat all the way in the back of the church, just in case I needed to get away really quick. And I never told Father Reinbold that I was attending a Baptist church. One of those Sundays, the choir got up to sing. And this girl got up in the choir that I had never seen in my life. And it was the most beautiful girl I ever saw. And I just listened to the choir and didn't hear anything else that went on in the service that Sunday. And I went that Wednesday by the way, I went to catechism on Wednesdays also. And I went to catechism with Father Reinbold on Wednesdays. And after class, I told Father Reinbold, Father, I don't think I can do this. And this is in my junior year of high school. And I had already been accepted to St. Joseph's University in Maine to start my religious studies. And I said, Father Reinbold, I don't think I can do this. And he said, do what? And I said, I don't think I can be a priest. So why not? I said, because this past Sunday, I saw the girl I'm going to marry.
Little considered, since he hadn't met me yet.
And Father Reinbold smiled, and I remember as vividly, he smiled and he said, "That's okay, Conrad. God will show you a different way to serve him." And he let me go.
Wow.
Yes, very gently. That was Wednesday. Friday, I went to youth group, which I had never attended. I saw Nilda, and I went up to Nilda and I said, "Hi, I'm Conrad."
Oh.
Well, I think that's a Damascus Road experience. If you're going to push me very far, I think that's fantastic. Well, tell me a little bit about your calling, because both of you ended up at seminary. How did you get to seminary, and what were your intentions in going to seminary?
Well, even though I always had that desire to serve God, I had no idea how I was going to be able to express that with the limitations that were placed on me. So when we went to seminary, really, it was Conrad who was going to go to seminary. By this time, we already had our first child. Nellie was a Marine Corps baby. So we went to seminary with Nellie. Later on, we had Conrad and Ellie in the Air Force. So 3 military babies. So we went to seminary really for Conrad to attend seminary, not me. And he was learning all these things in seminary. And he would come home and share them with me. And at that time, we were still in a very we still had a very fundamentalist view of scripture. And it terrified me. I was thinking, oh, he doesn't believe the Bible anymore. I was so afraid.
Yeah, and because I always wanted to be a priest, and when I met Nilda, I could not be a priest anymore. And I really struggled with that because I couldn't say that God was calling me. I didn't know how to articulate that, but I felt that I wanted to serve God, but now I could not be a priest. How could I serve? What was I going to be? And I really had a very hard struggle, not just with the calling, but with life in general. I went, I went off to college, and I didn't go to St. Joseph's. I stayed in a local college, Montclair State, there in northern New Jersey. And I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I changed majors every semester. By the time that my second year, middle of the second year, I literally flunked out of college, and I lost my scholarship and no job. By this time, Nilda and I were married. I married Nilda after my at the beginning of the middle of my first year of college. She was a junior. I was 20. She was 17. She was a junior in high school. I was 20, and no job, no college, no scholarship, and a family, husband and wife to support. So I saw a sign that said "The Few, the Proud, the Marines," and I joined the Marine Corps. I went off to boot camp in December of 75, and the Marine Corps being a department of the Navy, at that time, the Navy did not have chaplain assistants to Navy chaplain, enlisted chaplain assistants to Navy chaplain as a separate career field. They just brought people in from other career fields for a while to be chaplain's assistant. And the Marine Corps that year decided to test 50 Marines as chaplain's assistants out of, to see if it would work out in the Marine Corps also. And for whatever reason, these two Navy chaplains saw something, I don't know what, and they said, we want him to be one of the 50 that are going to be trained to be and work with us as a trained chaplain assistant. And I was picked by them. And for my entire 4 years in the Marine Corps, I functioned as a chaplain's assistant with Navy chaplains. For the first 3 years of my Marine Corps career, I worked with them, and they slowly brought out what they saw as the calling of God in me. very slowly and very gently, until the third year. One of them, Chaplain Johnson, we were sitting talking in his office, and I finally, under his pastoral leadership, I surrendered to God. I said, yes, I'm going to serve God, and I want to serve God as a chaplain, a military chaplain. And I had one more year left in the Marine Corps, which the Marine Corps sent me to Okinawa, Japan by myself. And I said, when I get out of the Marine Corps, I'm going to go to seminary. I had finished my college in the Marine Corps. And Chaplain Johnson said to me, that's wonderful, Conrad. You've surrendered to the ministry. But here's what I want you to do tonight. When you and Nilda put Nellie to bed, sit with Nilda and tell her that God is calling you into the ministry and you have answered the call, and you're going to do your last year in the Marine Corps and then go to seminary, and see what she tells you. Because if God is not calling her, he's not calling you. And I did that, just that. And Nilda said, let me tell you what I've been praying since I was 9 years old, and never told you or anyone else. God, make me a missionary or let me marry a minister.
And see, I was aware of his struggle, but I wouldn't say anything. I really felt strongly that if God was calling him, he needed to realize that and make that decision on his own, and not do it because of my influence, not do it because he thought that that's what I wanted him to do. So I wouldn't say anything to him. I would just pray for him, but I wouldn't say anything to him. And also, talking about the Marine Corps, this chaplain that was very influential in both of our lives, also his wife was an incredible mentor to me. When we got to the Marine Corps, we were babies. And this couple was about our parents' age. And they just took us in. She also had an incredible ministry to the women in the Marine Corps there at the base. And she just mentored us and took us in, and they became like a second set of parents to us. God just placed them there. I mean, they put so much into our lives.
So I finished my last year in the Marine Corps, and we went off to seminary. I got out of the Marine Corps. I was discharged in December of 79. I went home, picked up Nilda in New Jersey. I was in seminary in January of 80, the very next month. I had started in the spring semester. The other students had gone through the intro courses the first semester. And I came in the middle, and I started hearing things that I had never heard in my life. JEPD, historical critical context, the canon of scripture. I just got a canon. To me was something that went boom. And I went to my Old Testament professor, Dr. Ben Philbeck, and I said, sir, Dr. Philbeck, I'm leaving. I don't think you all believe scripture. I don't think, I'm leaving because this is hurting me. And I don't think you all are teaching the scripture. I don't think you believe in scripture. And he said to me, I understand, Conrad, keep what you have until you find, and if you do, find something that makes you a better Christian. And I said, oh, this professor is allowing me to be me. Instead of saying, you don't know what you're talking about, yeah, get out of here, And I said, let me listen to them. Let me really listen to them, and let me read more. And my seminary professors and Nilda's, they just brought the scriptures to life for us. And that's when I went to Nilda because we were struggling, and I said, why don't you consider going to seminary? Because so you can see what I'm learning. And she did, and the same thing happened to her. Her professors brought the scriptures to life, and we like to say that seminary was a born again experience for us, in the sense that we were never the same again.
we had wonderful professors. We went to Southeastern, and just before everything fell apart, and we just had wonderful professors who were very gentle, especially dealing with the two of us who came from such narrow backgrounds, and they were very, very gentle with us and just took us in and helped us along.
That was one of the great seminaries in the Baptist denomination, and it's one of the real tragedies of the denominational war. What an education you got. Well, tell me a little bit about how that transitioned to your vocations, because you both began to minister in the military, not so much on the field, but yet on the field, if that makes any sense. Tell me a little bit about that.
When Conrad joined the Air Force as a chaplain, and we started ministry at the chapel, I started to see that the women found me a safe person, being a chaplain's wife, a safe person that they could come to and share with me the struggles they were having with military life. And I started to think, well, maybe God is opening a door for ministry for me here. So I got very involved with Protestant Women of the Chapel, which was the ministry for women in the military, doing Bible studies and retreats and one-on-one with the different ladies that would come my way. And then I also was able to serve with mothers of preschoolers. The mothers of preschoolers had some military chapters of mobs. Really? And I was able to work with younger wives and help them navigate military life, especially during separations, and develop some wonderful, almost mother-daughter relationships, really, with the young girls. And another thing that the military did is that they had this program called Key Spouses. Well, Key Spouses were the equivalent to our care groups in church. And you were assigned a number of spouses who had deployed husbands so that we could keep track of them, help them, make sure they were doing emotionally well. And so I work with key spouses also. And in this way, God just opened the door for me to have a ministry of my own, especially with the women in the military. And it was very meaningful and very significant.
Yeah, Nilda's being too modest. She not only led Bible studies, but she went to conferences, and she actually led PWC groups. One of them was an Army PWC group at Fort Belvoir. We lived on an Army fort because I was stationed at the Pentagon. And she was the president of the group, which was 250 plus women strong. And she led I mean, she's being too modest. She had a ministry that was separate from mine. She followed me to seminary, and God was calling her all the time to have her own ministry. My ministry, especially in the first years, in the early years of being a chaplain, was like a pastor in uniform. I preached, I taught, I led Bible studies, I counseled. It was like a pastor in uniform. Later on, as I made a little more rank, then I became like the equivalent of Garrett, a senior pastor in a chapel where I led the chapel for that base. And then later on, I what's called a command chaplain with different chapels from different bases in different states and different personnel, sort of like a Catholic bishop in a city. And I did that for the 20 years of my career. I was basically a pastor, and the rest I was more in administrative work and taking care of chaplains. Now, I was deployed 4 times. And one of those deployments was during the Iraq War. And I was stationed I was deployed to Balad Air Base in Iraq, all the way on top of what was the Sunni Triangle, all the way on top. And it was a very, very active base in the war effort. And we had there the main hospital in Iraq. Everyone that was wounded in Iraq was brought to Balad. The doctors would patch them up, fix them as much as possible, and every night they would be transported to Germany for further care, and then back to the States. If you went to Balad alive, you had 98% chance of surviving, because the doctors and the nurses were that good. But we had a lot of trauma in that hospital. We saw a lot of trauma. I was the senior chaplain there. So my job was mainly, the way I saw my job was mainly to take care of the chaplains so that they could take care of the troops and the patients at the hospital. It was a very dangerous, chaotic, emotionally charged assignment. And for instance, every morning, I waited for the hospital chaplain to come off her 12-hour shift that night. And every morning we would go to breakfast together. And I would say, okay, what happened? Tell me, what did you see? And it was kind of a debriefing to her before she went to sleep for the day. At night, I would, after dinner at the chow hall, I would go to what's called the smoke pit. And I would sit there and this is not very Baptistic of me, but I would sit there and smoke a cigar with the guys and talk to them. And these were guys that hardly ever went to chapel, but I was there in their environment. And being there in their environment, they opened up to me about things that they saw and things that were going on. Like, chaplain, why does God allow wars like this to go on? And chaplain, why did my buddy die and not me? I was sitting next to him. And I was able to minister to these folks in their environment. And it was a ministry that slowly, as my military career, the calling that I felt to the chaplain ministry was confirmed and confirmed and confirmed.
That was the beauty of the military service for me. The opportunities to serve and minister to people outside the church walls. It was just opportunities that I had never had before because I was in church all the time. I only related with Christian people. All my friends were Christian. That was not the case in the military. Everyone was there, and I was able to just befriend people without any ulterior motives, only a desire to help them and to minister to them in whichever way God allowed me to do. It was awesome.
In those incredible moments, I think people are pushed to the edge where they really are asking life meaning questions. What is some of the advice that you gave to folks concerning their own calls or their own quest for God?
Well, like you said, in my counseling cases, I had a lot of life meaning questions that were asked, like, chaplain, what am I going to be when I grow up? Chaplain, should I get out of the Air Force? Chaplain, is this the right person? Should I marry this person? Life questions. And I developed a sermon about trying to discern the will of God in our lives with, of course, no guarantees. And I didn't preach the sermons to them in counseling, and don't worry, I'm not going to preach it to you today, this morning. But in that sermon, there were several points, and one was the first thing I told them was in the counseling cases was my experience with my struggle in knowing God's will in my life. I said, you're not alone. This is a struggle, and it's a journey. Instead of a one-time answer, this is what's going to happen. So you're in good company with the rest of all of us who are trying to discern the will of God in our lives. And then I would ask them, the first thing probably you need to do is honestly answer the question, because I had to honestly answer this question in my life. Am I willing to do God's will, no matter what it is? Am I really willing to do that? That's why I said in the sermon a couple of weeks ago in Jonah, I wonder what God would do had God called me to do what he called Jonah to do. I just wonder what I would have done. And you need to answer that question. And then finally, several steps, but then finally step out in faith and see what doors God opens for you, and listen to your close friends and your spiritual directors, if you have one, your pastor, they can confirm, a calling that you may be, or a will of God in your life that you may be struggling with. And there were, especially the military, they're so young and they're trying to figure life out, that some of them turn to the chaplain and to God and say, what am I going to be when I grow up?
Nilda, how did that translate with the women that you were ministering to? Did they have similar questions?
They did, and especially, a lot of them were new moms and with babies and toddlers, and they wanted to get ahead of themselves, and I said, every step of life, every season of life is different. Don't try to rush through this one. Enjoy it. Take your time. You're not going to have babies forever. You're not going to have 3 and 4 year olds forever. Enjoy each stage as they come, because the next time, some were a little bit concerned about the fact that they were so busy with their babies, they didn't have time to do a lot for God. And I'm like, right now, this is your season of life. There will come a time where you have more time in your hands. This is not the time for you to be out doing something else, because you're home raising your babies. There to every season, there is a time for everything. And sometimes they would get really, really desperate to, okay, I want the stage to be over to move on. And I said, no, take your time, enjoy. There will be a time for everything. God will show you the way, and at different times you will be able to do different things. And so that was part of the counsel.
Yeah, and once again, I'm sorry, but Nilda's being way too humble. I vividly remember one MOPS girl, mom, that told Nilda, you taught me how to be a wife. You saved my marriage. And to this day, she sends Nilda a Christmas card every year with a picture of her kids and their family vacation.
Janet.
Another one does sends her a Christmas ornament. They exchange the same Christmas ornament every year. She has her ministry with women was significant, especially with the military challenges of military family life.
Thank
Well,
you.
and your ministry has not been completed because what you're doing at Woodland is a gift for all of us. And I love this conversation. Thank you both. I think I've had a kind of a burning bush because my experience, because my computer has just lit up with the wisdom that you shared. Woodland, you need to get to know these two if you don't. It's been a wonderful morning. We're going to transition now to the classes, and I hope that you'll pick up on these questions of calling because it's my belief that God has a calling for each one of us. And one of the great things about having a Sunday school class or having a group of friends is that you can find out more about that by asking each other some of these difficult questions. Uh, Nilda, Conrad, thank you so much for being a part of us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.